All right, welcome to the John David Ebert School for the Study of Culture, Cosmology, and the Arts, and the first of our classes on Thomas Pynchon's novel Gravity's Rainbow, which we'll be going through chapter by chapter. But first, what I'd like to do is to do a sort of flyby overview of his eight novels and his one short story collection. There are very few photographs of him. There are these three that we know for sure that are back from his early life, age 16, a yearbook image, and when he was in the Navy. Until not that long ago, the National Enquirer did indeed find him and took a picture of him in 2019 when he was 81 years old. So that's about what he looks like now, just for the record. And so now, he was born in 1937, so he comes out of the whole East Coast world. His mother was Catholic and his father was Episcopalian, and he attended both services. And he comes out of the tradition of the Pynchons. Now, the Pynchon family that Hawthorne writes about in the House of the Seven Gables may have some relation to him. It's spelled with an E, Pynchon is how Hawthorne spells it. So there's a strong embedding in the East Coast tradition with Thomas Pynchon. He comes out of that whole world. So in 1953, he enters into Cornell specifically to study engineering. So he starts out as a left-brainer. He remains a left-brainer for most of his life, but there's a good balance, I think, with him, with both hemispheres. And then he interrupted that education to go into the Navy. So he was in the Navy for a couple of years, and then in 50, he went back, returned in 58 to Cornell, where he did attend some lectures of Nabokov, and made friends with Richard Farina and Kirkpatrick Sale. And it was with Kirkpatrick Sale that he co-wrote the libretto for an opera, a science fiction opera called Minstrel Island. That manuscript exists, and it is in the possession of academia. I'm sure it'll be published eventually. And at the same time, he's writing short stories, which are collected in Slow Learner, The Small Rain, and Mortality and Mercy in Vienna. Mortality and Mercy in Vienna is not in that collection for some odd reason. And I think, ironically, that it's the best of his short stories. The short stories are just so-so. As the title says, Slow Learner, that was the correct title. But he made up for that with V, which he published in 1963, and it is most assuredly one of the best first novels ever written. It won an award for that, a Faulkner Award, and comparable in magnitude maybe with Joyce's Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man, let's say, or Cormac McCarthy's first novel, The Orchard Keeper. These are all home runs, just right out of the starting gate. And so V gets into the issue of the existence of a woman whose initial we only know by V. She may be named Veronica, or she may be named anything that begins with the letter V. Herbert Stencil, as his last name implies, is coming up with a kind of conspiracy theory about her existence, and she ends up being the sort of what McLuhan would call the mechanical bride, the muse of the anima motrix, the anima that is in the machine, as I call it, the anima motrix. And that's what V is about. It's just a magnificent novel. But right from the start, and you can see the postmodern tendencies in Pynchon right from the start, because he brings truth under suspicion. Now, is it the case with grand historical meta-narratives that we are just projecting stencils onto events and organizing them in accordance with those stencils? And if that is the case, then can we ever reach truth? Can we ever reach what Kant would call the Ding an sich, the thing in itself, as it is in and of itself, beyond our perceptive faculties? So that is the central cognitive and epistemological problem that Pynchon works on all through his career. He reiterates the same theme again in The Crying of Lot 49, which is his shortest book and his most accessible, and it's the one I always recommend for anyone who wants to be introduced to him. It is an absolutely sensational novel, short but powerful, put out in 1966, about this communications conspiracy, this underground postal service called the Trastero, which has been around for centuries and has been a secret underground rival to the Postal Service. And Oedipa Maas is a woman who finds out about it and its symbol is the post horn, the muted post horn, though. That's symbolic. And note that the horn is the symbol for Gabriel. Gabriel is the angel who is the equivalent to Mercury Hermes Tot, the being who rules over communications, and he blows the horn at the Last Judgment. So there's a reference there to that. Does the Tristero exist, or does it not? Pynchon never tells you. He leaves it up to you. This is postmodernity, where now truth and grand meta-narratives are under suspicion. And then, so he has moved from New York. He's come out of that whole New York cultural world, and then writes Gravity's Rainbow in Manhattan Beach, California. So he writes this. So he's sort of, in a way, he's bi-coastal. You can't say that he's an East Coast writer or a West Coast writer because he sort of straddles both of the coasts. He does remind me, in a way, the comparison between him, Pynchon, and Cormac McCarthy, who is landlocked and comes out of the South, reminds me of the difference between Homer and Hesiod. Homer is an island man. He's a seaman. He's constantly hopping around the islands, whereas Hesiod is a landlocked Boeotian farmer. So they sort of embody those two archetypes. And I think of the two of them as the greatest writers of the second half of the 20th century. It's nice to see America putting great writers on the stage again to rival European intellect. And so he works on Gravity's Rainbow, puts it out in 1973. It's just this sprawling monster, a masterpiece, definitely the rival of Ulysses, and similar in terms of its encyclopedic erudition and also difficulty of reading. It is not an easy book to get through, as we'll see here as we go through it. It's broken into 4 sections, Beyond the Zero. And Beyond the Zero is 21 episodes, and that, of course, is meant to correspond to the 21 cards of the tarot deck, the major arcana, to which if you add the zero card, the Fool card, then it becomes 22 cards. So he's weaving tarot in here, he's weaving Kabbalah in here. The whole Hermetic tradition is bound up with this book. It's part of that tradition, as is Ulysses. Part 2, Perm au Casino Hermanngering, is 8 episodes. 8 is a pentad because every 8 years the planet Venus forms a pentagram in the sky. And then part 3, In the Zone, is 32 episodes. And then part 4, The Counterforce, is 12 episodes. All of those numbers are mythologically suspect, you might say. They're all significant numbers within the Hermetic tradition. So this is a Hermetic novel. So, and here again, the main theme of it, whereas the main theme of Ulysses is love, the main theme of Gravity's Rainbow is free will. Is there such a thing? Does free will exist? If it does, how can we prove it? Going beyond the zero is the stimulus from classical conditioning. You ring the bell and the dog salivates. What if we reduce the stimulus to 0? What happens then? Is the individual Tyrone Slothrop, who has been classically conditioned, does he have freedom, or does he break free and disappear? And indeed, as we'll see, he does break free and he disappears into myth and legend in the last section of the novel. Then there was a pause while he started working on Mason and Dixon immediately after Gravity's Rainbow. That was to be his next novel. That was his intention, but not what actually took place. So he went back in 1984 and published his short stories that he had taught himself how to write fiction. And they're all here. The Small Rain and Mortality and Mercy in Vienna. I have never seen it. It says available only in some editions. I have never seen it in any edition of Slow Learner, so I don't know which edition that is. And for some reason, he doesn't include it, but it's the best of the stories, ironically. I don't know what he didn't like about it. It's about a proto-spree killer. Lowlands, Entropy, Under the Rose, and The Secret Integration. These are all so-so stories. None of them make any large impression upon the reader. You would never guess that the guy who wrote these stories would later go on to write behemoths like Gravity's Rainbow. You would never guess that in a million years. And so he put that out, and then took time away from Mason and Dixon to put out Vilan, a 1990 so-so novel. I know there are people who like this novel. It's set in California. Vineland was what the Vikings named America, Vinland. And so he names it that. It's just kind of a paranoid conspiracy. It's one of his small-scale novels. It's not one of his best. Not one of my favorites. I think Harold Bloom gave it a bad review. He didn't like it either. Whereas Harold Bloom's review for Mason and Dixon was just absolutely astonishing here. Let's see, I had the book. Here it is. So Mason and Dixon. So then this is another sprawling, rambling, epic behemoth, probably the second greatest novel that he has ever written. He has three giants: Gravity's Rainbow, Mason and Dixon, and Against the Day. They are all magnificent. This was published in 1997, and it tells the story of the creation of the Mason-Dixon line by the astronomers Charles Mason and Jeremiah Dixon. They're British astronomers who are going around the planet measuring planetary transits, such as the transit of Venus on the island of Sumatra, and so forth. So it's based on historical fact, but of course Pynchon has lots of fun distorting fact with his storytelling abilities. Set in the late 18th century, as they're laying out the boundary line between Pennsylvania and Maryland. All right, and then so moving on then to his third great epic novel, Against the Day. This came out, it's 1,085 pages, came out in 2006, and it is also an impressive giant of a novel. The novel is about light. Against the Day, contre-jour, is a mode of French photography in which you shoot against the day. But it also means those who are against the prevailing day. You have the mainstream culture, but then you have those who are against the mainstream culture and form a counterculture of their own. The novel begins at the Chicago World's Fair at the end of the 19th century. That's its beginning point, and so it covers the events leading up to the outbreak of World War I. Just magnificent. I hope to do a class on both of these other novels, Mason and Dixon and Against the Day, if I can get enough people interested. And then his last two, his most recent two, are back to so-so again. He has this weird oscillation between fantastic novels that are as good as Ulysses or the Magic Mountain, and then these so-so ones that are forgettable. Inherent Vice. The problem with Inherent Vice is that it reads like a parody of a Pynchon novel. It's as though someone set out to write a parody. So it ends up being a kind of self-parody because it magnifies all the flaws, the emphasis on weird conspiracy theories, and it magnifies what had been subtle and minor perturbations in the Pynchon cosmology and pulls those out and magnifies them so that they become indeed a bit much. A bit much. I didn't care for the movie either. I thought it was unwatchable. The only movie so far, as far as I'm aware, made by on a Thomas Pynchon novel. I don't know why somebody hasn't made The Crying of Lot 49, because it most certainly could be made. In a way, David Cronenberg with Videodrome gives a tip of the hat to it with his idea of the Videodrome conspiracy, which Max Wren discovers, which may or may not exist. We're never entirely sure. So that is clearly a tip to Crying of Lot 49. Pynchon is one of David Cronenberg's favorite authors, by the way. And then his most recent novel, Bleeding Edge, another total so-so novel. It's utterly forgettable, set in Silicon Valley. 2013 was when it came out, and it's not much fun. So that's the overview. Hopefully, now Pynchon is 86 years old now, and it's been, 10 years since, it's been exactly 10 years, 2013. So hopefully we're due for at least one more magnificent Pynchon novel. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. I don't know what the rumors are, but he's getting near the end of the show here. So, all right, so that sets us up for Gravity's Rainbow, and I'll look forward then to seeing you in class and talking about this monster. So for class, make sure that you've read about the first 50 pages, which is the first 8 episodes of Beyond the Zero.